Prologue. The city wept that night. Rain fell not in sheets but in sobs, splashing against rusted window panes and pooling in the cracks of broken sidewalks. Callie's boots were soaked through, her toes numb beneath thin socks, but she barely noticed. She'd worked a double shift at the diner, short-staffed again, and her back ached from hours of fake smiles and lukewarm coffee. Still, she didn't complain. She never did. Turning onto Ellison Street, her steps slowed as the wind shifted, carrying a faint sound, a cough. Not sharp or alarming, but soft, as if someone were trying not to be heard. She paused beneath the flickering neon sign of her apartment building and looked toward the alley beside the entrance. A man sat there, curled against the brick wall, hunched in a tattered coat that didn't look like it belonged to this decade, his knees drawn close, arms wrapped tight. Rain ran down his dark hair in rivulets, soaking through a canvas duffel bag at his feet. His beard was too neatly trimmed to be ignored, his jaw too sculpted to be missed, even in the shadows. She should have kept walking. She knew that. But something about him, about the way he didn't look up, didn't beg, didn't even flinch when thunder cracked overhead, anchored her feet. "You'll freeze to death out here," she said, voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. He glanced up slowly, eyes narrowing just slightly. Blue, not just blue, but distant, as if they'd once burned hot and now barely smoldered. He didn't answer. "I'm not offering money," she added quickly, sensing the tension bristle beneath his silence. "Just shelter. A couch. One night." The words hung there, more reckless than she'd meant them to sound. He stared at her, clearly waiting for the punchline, or the condition, or the lie. But there was none. "Why?" he asked finally. His voice was low, rough like unused gravel. Callie shrugged, blinking rain from her lashes. "You looked like you needed it." His lips quirked, not quite a smile. Most people say that and still walk away. "I'm not most people." Another beat of silence passed. Then, as if the choice pained him more than the cold, he stood, slowly, cautiously. Even soaked, his presence was magnetic, controlled, like someone used to command, now clinging to anonymity. Callie turned without another word and unlocked the building's front door. She didn't ask his name. She didn't need it. Not yet. But as he stepped into the dimly lit hallway, dripping onto the faded linoleum, something twisted in her gut. Not fear. Something else. Like a whisper from fate. Like the first page of a story that would change everything. Who is he really? And what happens when kindness invites mystery into your home?
Welcome to another episode on Ever After Romance audiobook. This is an original story for entertainment only. Enjoy.
Chapter 1. The Girl with the Warm Heart. Callie's apartment smelled like cinnamon and secondhand books. A candle flickered on the kitchen counter beside a chipped mug, and soft jazz played from an old Bluetooth speaker she'd rescued from a yard sale. It wasn't much. Tiny, with peeling wallpaper and a space heater that groaned at night. But it was hers. And now, his too. At least for the night. The man stood in the entryway, still dripping, eyes sweeping the space like he wasn't sure he belonged inside anything anymore. "You can hang your coat on that hook," she said gently, trying not to make him feel like a guest. Or, anywhere. He hesitated, then unpeeled the wet fabric from his frame. Callie's eyes flicked to the scars on his knuckles, faint, healed over, but impossible to ignore. They looked like the past had fought him hard. And maybe he'd let it. "I'm Callie," she offered as she moved to the linen closet and pulled out an oversized towel. "No last name required, unless you're secretly a prince or something." He didn't laugh, but something about his expression softened as he took the towel. "Theo." Callie tilted her head. "Just Theo?" He met her gaze with a calm steadiness. "For now." Her breath caught for a second. Not from fear, but from the weight in those two words. They weren't flirtatious. They weren't evasive. They were Haunted. Well, Theo for now, she said, her voice lighter than her heart felt. The couch pulls out. Sheets are clean mostly. Don't judge the pattern. My aunt was into sunflowers. She moved with practiced ease, unfolding the bed, fluffing the old throw pillow, avoiding his eyes because, if she looked too long, she might start wondering what his story was. And she wasn't sure she was ready for the answers. "Do you do this often?" he asked, voice still low, but curious now. "Invite soaked strangers into your home?" "No," Callie said honestly. "But I've been the stranger before. Not soaking wet, but invisible." That made him pause. She glanced at him then, really looked. The towel hung loosely around his neck, and his black shirt clung to lean muscle like the rain hadn't quite let go. He wasn't classically beautiful, but there was a quiet gravity in him. Something raw, something regal that didn't match the streets he'd come from. "You hungry?" she asked. He shook his head. "I'm fine." "You don't look it." Theo's lips twitched, almost a smirk, but the walls around his eyes stayed up. Silence settled between them, not awkward, not tense, just unspoken. A shared moment stitched with gratitude and uncertainty. "Bathroom's down the hall," she added softly. "I'll get you some dry clothes. I don't want to be trouble." "You already are," she said with a wink, turning away. "But the good kind." And for the first time since he'd stepped in from the storm, Theo smiled, small, real, like something old inside him had cracked open. But as Callie walked into her room, she had no idea that man she'd just made a bed for was about to turn her entire world upside down. Chapter 2. The Couch Confession. Callie padded back into the living room in flannel pajamas and a hoodie that had seen better days. She held out a bundle of clothes, an old t-shirt and gray joggers from her ex, long since erased from her life but still haunting her laundry drawer. "They're not fancy," she said, "but they're dry." Theo took them without a word, his fingers brushing hers, just for a second. It was the lightest contact, a ghost of skin against skin. And yet, something about it clung to her, like the memory of warmth in winter. He disappeared into the bathroom, leaving behind the scent of rain and something else. Something colder. Something unreachable. Callie stared at the pull-out couch, at the little sunflowers dancing across the sheets, and sighed. What had she just invited into her life? A few minutes later, Theo emerged. Cleaner, drier, more human. And somehow, less. He looked smaller in the dim lamplight, like someone trying not to take up space. But the shirt clung to his chest and the sweatpants hung just right, and Callie suddenly wished she'd offered a blanket and a separate room. He walked toward the couch but didn't lie down. Instead, he stood there, eyes on the window, watching the city as if it owed him something. She sat across from him, cross-legged in her battered armchair, mug in hand. "So," she said, breaking the silence. "You've got the brooding part down, but let me guess, you're not actually homeless. You're a secret agent with amnesia." He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "Wrong genre?" she teased, sipping her tea. "No, you're just close." Her heart skipped just once. "I'm not looking for your life story," she added, softer now. "But if you want to talk, I'm here." Theo hesitated, his fingers flexed, then curled into fists. "I had everything," he said finally, voice barely louder than the wind outside. "And I lost it, not by accident, by choice." Callie blinked. "That's not something most people choose." "I didn't say it was smart," he replied. "Or clean. I walked away. From a life. From expectations. From people who wanted to turn me into something I hated." She leaned forward, elbows on knees. "So you became this?" His jaw clenched. "This is temporary." That much she already knew. There was nothing temporary about the way he held himself, or the way he looked out at the city like he still owned it, or how the air shifted when he was near, like gravity had its own opinion. "You don't scare me," she said quietly. His gaze snapped back to hers. "You should," he said. But the way he said it wasn't a threat. It was a warning, and that terrified her more. Yet still, she didn't look away. Instead, she said the only thing that made sense. "Sleep. Tomorrow's a new day." Theo finally lay down, pulling the blanket over his chest. But his eyes stayed open, fixed on the ceiling. And in that strange, shared silence, Callie couldn't shake the feeling that her quiet little world had just let in a storm. Chapter 3. Whispers over coffee. The scent of dark roast drifted through the apartment like a gentle wake-up call. Morning light spilled through the narrow windows, turning dust motes into dancing flecks of gold. Callie stood barefoot in the kitchen, wrapped in her oversized cardigan, watching the coffee machine drip rhythmically as if it were breathing. She still couldn't believe he was real. Theo had barely moved all night. At least that's what she gathered every time she stirred awake and glanced toward the pull-out couch. He lay so still, so silent, that she wondered if he slept at all, or just lay there thinking about the life he left behind. She hadn't asked. Not yet. Some truths came wrapped in thorns. They needed time. The couch creaked. Her hand froze around her favorite chipped mug. Theo sat up, the blanket draped over his lap, his hair tousled, his eyes even darker in the morning light. For a moment, he looked like a prince who had wandered out of a fairy tale and forgotten which side of the story he belonged to. "I made coffee," she said, her voice softer than usual. He didn't answer right away, just rose with the quiet power of someone used to moving without asking for permission. His bare feet patted against the floorboards as he stepped into the kitchen, eyes never quite meeting hers. Callie poured a second mug and held it out. "Black okay?" "Perfect." Their fingers brushed again. This time he didn't flinch. He took a slow sip, and for a brief second, something unreadable flickered in his gaze. Regret? Nostalgia? A memory stirred by coffee and kindness? Callie leaned against the counter, wrapping both hands around her mug. "So, what's the plan?" He arched a brow. "For today," she clarified. "Are you disappearing again? Or sticking around to see if my couch becomes a real bed?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I haven't decided." "Right," she said, nodding. "Mystery man logic." His lips twitched again, not quite a smile, but not nothing either. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "Oh? What did you expect?" "Someone who asked more questions, wanted more answers, tried to fix me." She sipped her coffee and shrugged. "I've learned that some people don't want to be fixed, just seen." Theo's gaze caught hers, and this time, it didn't let go. The air between them stretched, tighter than silence, warmer than steam. "I see you, Theo," she whispered. He inhaled sharply, then looked away. "That's what scares me." Before she could answer, a knock came at the door, sharp, impatient, authoritative. Callie's heart lurched. Theo's expression changed instantly. The softness disappeared, replaced by something hard, trained, dangerous. She set her mug down. "You expecting someone?" He didn't answer. The knock came again, louder this time. Callie took a step toward the door. Theo's voice stopped her cold. "Don't!" There was something in his tone. Ice and fire, command and desperation. And that's when she knew. Whoever was on the other side of that door, they weren't just knocking for him, they were coming for his secrets. Chapter 4. The Past at the Door. The knock came again, heavier this time, less like a request, more like a warning. Callie froze mid-step, her fingers hovering near the doorknob. Theo's voice still echoed in her head. "Don't." She turned to face him. "What's going on?" she asked, heart thudding now in places she didn't know could pound. Theo moved toward her with slow, deliberate steps, his entire body tense like a coiled spring. His bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor, but he radiated something electric, dangerous, barely restrained. He wasn't just a man who had fallen on hard times. He was something else. Someone used to control, to power, to being hunted. "I need you to trust me," he said quietly, eyes locked on hers. "Don't open that door." "You're scaring me," she breathed. "I'm trying to protect you." The knock turned into a loud, open-palmed bang. "Open up! Management!" Callie blinked. Her landlord, Mr. Gilroy. She looked back at Theo. His shoulders eased a fraction, but only a fraction. His chest rose and fell in slow, silent breaths. "Stay out of sight," she whispered, then turned and unlocked the door. Gilroy stood there, red-faced and irritated, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. His cheap cologne hit her before his words did. "Miss Callahan, this is the third time this month your rent is late." She forced a polite smile. I know, I'm working on it. I got extra shifts at the diner." "Not good enough. You've got until Friday, or you're out." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And word on the street is you've got some guy staying here." Her stomach dropped. "That's none of your business." "It is, if he's not on the lease. No guests longer than 48 hours, remember?" She laughed, too loud, too fake. "He's not staying. He just crashed on the couch. Rainstorm. Nothing serious." Gilroy's eyes swept past her shoulder. She leaned a little to block his view. He didn't push further, but his tone dropped, oily and smug. "You don't want to make trouble, sweetheart. Just make the payment." He handed her a yellow notice and walked off without waiting for a reply. She closed the door, locking it twice. Theo stepped out from the hallway shadows. "He's watching you." She nodded, her hand still trembling around the paper. "He always does, especially when he thinks I'm vulnerable." Theo walked past her into the kitchen, his body moving like he had unfinished business with the world. "You shouldn't have to live like this," he muttered, staring out the window. "I've managed." "Barely." She folded her arms. "It's not your job to rescue me." His voice dropped low, almost inaudible. "Maybe I want to." Her breath caught, the way he said it. It wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation. It was something deeper, something dangerous. "I don't need saving," she whispered, but even she could hear the crack in her voice. Theo turned toward her then, fully, completely, and his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a drifter anymore. They were the eyes of a man who had once owned everything and was ready to claim something again. Or someone. Chapter 5. Pieces of the Past. The yellow eviction notice sat on the table like an unspoken threat. Callie hadn't touched it. Neither had Theo. But it hovered there, a quiet reminder that kindness didn't pay the bills and the world had claws. Outside, the city groaned to life with sirens, rain-slicked tires, and subway grumbles. Inside, the silence between them was heavier than any storm. Theo stood by the window again, half-shadowed, half-lit, staring at nothing, or maybe everything. Callie studied him from across the room, her heartbeat betraying her every time their eyes nearly met. He wore silence like armor, but she was starting to see the cracks. "You didn't sleep much," she said softly. He turned, slow and deliberate. "Old habits." "From what?" she asked, daring a step closer. "War zone? High-stress hedge fund? Secret agent?" His lips curled slightly. "You joke, but you're not far off." Her brows lifted. "Wait, are you actually telling me something?" "I used to be someone," he said finally, voice low. A name people knew, a face in magazines, a man who controlled more buildings in this city than he could count. Callie's breath hitched. She didn't laugh. Something in his voice stopped her. "Used to be?" He walked to the coffee table, picked up the eviction notice, turned it over without looking at the words. They took it all. My name, my company, even my father's legacy. Every boardroom turned their back. Her lips parted. You were in real estate? He gave a short, humorless laugh. I was real estate. Theo Castile. Maybe you've heard the name. The name slammed into her like a punch. Of course she had. Theo Castile, once New York's youngest real estate mogul. Son of Raymond Castile, the ruthless tycoon who built skyscrapers from shadows and secrets. There had been scandals, a hostile board takeover, whispers of betrayal and embezzlement, though none proven. You were that Theo Castile? I still am, he said quietly, placing the notice back down. But it doesn't matter, not anymore. Callie's mind raced. Why didn't you tell me? He met her gaze, and for once let his walls down completely. Because I needed to know what kindness felt like when it wasn't bought. Her chest tightened. All this time, she thought she'd been helping a broken stranger. But the truth was more complicated, more layered. He was a man who had once held the city in his palm and lost it all. And yet, he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered now. I don't care who you were, she said softly. I only care who you are when you're with me. Theo blinked, startled by the sincerity in her voice. But before either of them could speak again, a vibration buzzed against the counter. A sleek, black phone. Not hers. Theo picked it up. His face changed the moment he read the message. What is it? She asked. He looked up, jaw clenched. They found me. Chapter 6. The Choice. Theo's fingers curled tightly around the phone, knuckles whitening. His shoulders tensed like steel cables pulled to the point of snapping. Callie stepped closer, her voice gentle, but edged with fear. Who found you? His eyes flicked to hers, burning now, not with fear, but with a storm. The board. My father's old partners. They never stopped watching me, waiting for me to resurface. She blinked. But why? I thought they pushed you out. They did. He paused. But I still own 30% of Castile Holdings, enough to block major acquisitions, enough to scare them. So, what? They want to stop you from taking it back? Theo didn't answer. He didn't need to. Callie exhaled shakily, trying to keep pace with the revelation unraveling in front of her. Just days ago, he was a stranger soaked from the storm. Now he was a man who once ruled the skyline, hunted not by poverty, but by power. Her couch had cradled a king in exile. They'll come after me too, won't they? She whispered. Theo turned away, his voice low. They already are. He opened the cabinet beneath the sink and retrieved a plain duffel bag, one she hadn't noticed before. He unzipped it, revealing a neatly folded jacket, a sleek laptop, a hardbound black folder, and a gold-plated keycard. What is all that? She asked. Proof. Leverage. My last move, if I ever came back. You were planning to? He hesitated, then looked up. No. I was done. I left that world behind. Until you. The words were soft, but hit her like thunder. You make me want to stay, he continued. To fight. Her heart stuttered in her chest, but before she could speak, another vibration buzzed from the phone, louder this time. Theo's face hardened. Callie, he said, voice urgent. I need to go tonight. She recoiled. What? You just said, I have to protect you. If I stay, they'll come here. You'll be dragged into something you don't deserve. And if you leave, she snapped, voice cracking, you'll disappear again? Walk back into your world and leave me like none of this happened? Pain flickered across his face. I would never forget you. But you'd leave me, she said, her eyes burning. That's the part you don't say. Theo crossed the room in 2 long strides and cupped her face in both hands. His thumbs trembled against her skin. I've lost everything, Callie. But if I lose you now, I lose the only good thing I've found in years." Her breath hitched, her throat thick with emotion. "Then don't go." "I have to," he whispered. "But when I come back," he leaned in, forehead against hers. "I won't come back poor. I'll come back powerful. Not for the company, not for revenge, for you." Callie tried to speak, but the lump in her throat wouldn't budge. He kissed her, soft and slow, as if trying to imprint every second into memory, and then he pulled away and vanished into the night. Chapter 7. The City Remembers. 3 weeks passed. Callie marked each day by the sound of silence. No more shared breakfasts, no more deep midnight talks by the window, no more footsteps creaking down her hallway. Her apartment was still the same, but without Theo, it felt like an echo of a life that almost was. Outside, the city roared on. Headlines whispered his name again. Theo Castile reemerges to challenge board takeover. The fallen heir returns with a vengeance. The billionaire nobody saw coming. She read them all with shaking hands. Each article painted him as a storm. The lost heir turned corporate firebrand. But none of them knew what she did. They didn't know about the man who slept on her couch, folded her laundry, whispered thank you with his eyes when words failed. They didn't know the way he had looked at her, right before he disappeared into the rain again. At the cafe, Callie kept her head down. Some customers had started to connect the dots. A few even whispered when she passed, "Isn't that the girl who... I heard she took him in. Maybe she's the reason he came back." One afternoon, her manager pulled her aside. "You okay?" Dina asked, brow furrowed. "I mean, after everything?" Callie nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. Really." But that wasn't true. She was surviving. There was a difference. That evening, as she walked home with aching feet and a heavy heart, a familiar silver car slowed beside her at the curb. A driver stepped out, crisp in black. "Miss Callie Hart?" She froze. "Yes?" "I've been asked to deliver this." He handed her a navy blue envelope sealed with gold foil. The edges trembled in her hand as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, one she recognized instantly by the slant and sharpness of the pen. "Come to 143 Kingsley. Rooftop. Midnight. I kept my promise." Tsh! Her heart leapt into her throat. Kingsley. That was Castile Tower, the skyline jewel Theo's father had built before the empire crumbled. That night, Callie stood in front of the building in a borrowed black dress, her hair pinned up with shaking fingers. She told herself to turn back. She didn't belong here, surrounded by suits and limousines and tinted glass. But she remembered his voice, the promise in his kiss. She took the elevator up. Each floor that passed felt like a heartbeat closer to something life-altering. When the doors slid open, cool air greeted her. The rooftop stretched out like a private paradise. Strings of golden lights, soft music humming, candles flickering on stone pillars. And in the middle of it all, Theo. He turned as if he'd felt her the second she arrived. Callie stepped forward. He was no longer the man she'd pulled from the street, but she knew him. The way he looked at her hadn't changed. "I told you I'd come back for you," he said softly. She opened her mouth, but the words died on her tongue. Because behind him, a group of men in tailored suits stepped into the light, one holding a contract. Chapter 8. A Proposal and a Price. Callie froze beneath the glow of the rooftop lights, her eyes flicking from Theo to the suited men now standing behind him like shadows cast from a dangerous past. He stepped forward quickly, his jaw tight, eyes flickering with apology. "They're not here for them," he said gently. "They're here for you." Callie blinked. "Me?" One of the men, tall and silver-haired with ice-blue eyes, approached. "Miss Hart," he said smoothly, with a voice trained to convince and command. "My name is Gregory Slate. I'm Theo's legal counsel. This," he motioned to the document in his hands, "is a partnership proposal. From Theo. To you." She stared at him. A partnership? Theo turned, his voice lower now, touched with something that sounded like hope and heartbreak all at once. I meant it when I said I came back for you, Callie. But not just to find a place in your life. I want to build one. With you. She stepped back slightly, her breath catching in her throat. The city glittered below them, 1,000 lights blinking like stars, but her vision narrowed to the document now being laid on a silver tray between them. Her name was at the top. Callie Hart, co-founder. He'd made her a stakeholder. I know this is a lot, Theo said quietly, stepping closer. But you believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. You fed me. You sheltered me. You listened when no one else cared. This city chewed me up, spit me out, and you reminded me that I'm still human. I didn't do it for this, she whispered. I know, he said, reaching for her hand. That's why you're the only person I can trust. She looked down at his fingers laced with hers, and suddenly she remembered the man who used to sit barefoot at her counter, sipping lukewarm coffee with bed hair and secrets. This man, the one now wrapped in wealth and power, was still him. Still Theo. Still hers, if she wanted, but nothing in life came without a price. She pulled her hand away gently. What happens if I say no? Theo's eyes softened. Then I still love you. Callie exhaled, overwhelmed. You're offering me a piece of an empire. He gave a faint smile. No, I'm offering you a seat next to me, where you've already belonged. The wind picked up, sending her hair tumbling as the city watched from below. Her heart pounded, torn between fear and something wilder, something that tasted like freedom. She looked down at the contract, then up into his eyes. Before she could answer, Slate's phone rang. He stepped aside, listening for a beat, then stiffened. There's been a breach, he muttered to Theo. Boardroom. Someone leaked your return. Theo's body locked with tension. Callie stepped closer instinctively, but before she could speak, the rooftop lights flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed the city's crown, and from the shadows a voice whispered, He was never yours to begin with. Chapter 9. Enemies in the light. The rooftop plunged into sudden darkness, the glittering skyline behind them fading to a cold silhouette. Callie's breath hitched. Theo immediately stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body, his shoulders squared in silent defense. The flicker of city lights cast faint shadows across his tense profile, his jaw tight as steel. Slate barked something into his phone, but static cut through the air like a warning. And then came the voice again, this time clearer, colder. You think you can crawl out of the gutter and reclaim a kingdom, Theo? We were fine without you. From the stairwell, a figure emerged, calm, calculated, venom curling in every step. Callie didn't recognize him, but Theo did. His voice was barely above a growl. Damien. The man smiled, suited, smug, with eyes that gleamed like broken glass. Welcome back, cousin. The prodigal stray returns, with a waitress on his arm. Callie stiffened. Theo took another step forward. Leave her out of this. But Damien's gaze slid to her like oil. She's the one who dragged you back to life, isn't she? He said, circling slowly. You were halfway to dying in the streets, and she cleaned you up, played Florence Nightingale. But what happens when the fairy tale ends? You think she fits into this world? I don't care if she fits into your world, Theo snapped, because she fits into mine. Callie's heart twisted, but Damien's smile widened. Touching, really. But the board doesn't want sentiment. They want strength. And they don't think you have it, not with her distracting you. Slate stepped forward, eyes flashing. He has controlling shares now. You have no power. Not yet, Damien said, lifting a hand, and behind him, 3 more men stepped into view. Security, armed. Callie's stomach dropped. What do you want? Theo demanded. Damien smirked. A vote, tomorrow. If you're not there, they assume you've abandoned your claim and I step in. And if I am there, Theo growled, Then I destroy you. Callie stepped forward before she could stop herself, her voice trembling but clear. You're threatened by him. That's why you're here, throwing shadows and flexing muscle because you know what he can do. Damien laughed. No, sweetheart. I'm not threatened. I'm bored. He turned on his heel and walked back toward the stairwell, his guards following like wolves. Oh, he added over his shoulder, and if I were you, I'd keep an eye on that girl. She's what we call leverage. The rooftop doors slammed shut. Silence returned, but it was no longer peaceful. Theo turned to Callie, his eyes unreadable. I'm sorry. She stepped closer, eyes locked on his. Don't be. You didn't start this war, but I'm not running from it. A long pause. And then he whispered, as though tasting hope and fear in the same breath. Then stay with me. Through all of it. Callie looked into the dark city, into the fire he was about to walk into, and she nodded. I'm not leaving. Chapter 10. The night before the war. Theo's penthouse was soaked in golden lamplight, tall glass walls staring out at a city that no longer looked like home, but like battleground. Callie stood at the edge of the window, arms folded tight across her chest. Below, cars moved like blood cells through veins of steel and asphalt. She watched them in silence, barely breathing. Behind her, Theo placed 2 mugs of coffee on the counter. The smell, rich, warm, familiar, broke something in her chest. She turned slowly. You still remember how I take it. He gave her a quiet smile. You drink it like it's medicine. 1 sugar, no cream. And you take yours like a 5-year-old, she said gently. All syrup, no coffee. His lips twitched, but his eyes were serious. Some things never change. Callie crossed the room, picked up her cup, and took a sip. It was perfect, which somehow made it worse. She set it down and whispered, You're really going through with this, aren't you? Theo nodded. Tomorrow morning, I walk into that boardroom and take back the company. I take back what my father left me, what Damien twisted. But I can't promise it won't get ugly. She searched his face. Why not walk away? His jaw flexed. Because walking away means he wins. Means men like him keep deciding who belongs and who gets crushed. He stepped closer, his voice low. Because if I don't fight, he'll come after you again, and I'd rather lose everything than let that happen. Callie's breath trembled. You shouldn't have to carry all of that. I don't want to, he said softly. I want to carry you. That's all I've wanted since you opened that door and gave me a second chance at being human. Silence bloomed between them, heavy, sacred. And then, slowly, Theo lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch lingered, light, reverent. Callie's heart beat loud in her ears. Are you scared? Only of losing you, he whispered. The air pulsed with something thick and electric. He stepped closer. I want you beside me tomorrow. Not because I need a pretty distraction in a power suit, but because I need you, the woman who made me remember who I am. She reached for his hand. Their fingers met, laced, held. I'll be there, she said. Theo leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers. Even if I fail? You won't, she said. But if you do, we fall together. His lips hovered near hers, warm breath dancing across her mouth. And just as they leaned into that first, fragile kiss, the front door buzzed. They froze. Theo pulled away, walking toward the panel. A message blinked across the screen. Delivery, from D-Lex. He stared. Damien? Callie whispered. Theo opened the door. A single envelope lay on the mat. Inside, a photo. Callie. Sleeping. Taken from the window. A threat written beneath in slashed ink. You should have stayed in the gutter, cousin. Tomorrow I take everything, including her. Chapter 11. The Boardroom Reckoning. The morning sky was overcast, casting the city in a steely gray hush. From 30 stories up, the skyline looked like a row of silent judges, watching, waiting. Theo stood before the full-length mirror, adjusting his tie. His reflection was calm, but his pulse thudded with a storm he could no longer ignore. Behind him, Callie slipped her arms into a sleek black blazer, one that matched her quiet strength. Her hair was swept back, exposing the vulnerable curve of her neck. She looked like defiance dressed in silk. "You're shaking," she said gently. Theo glanced at her through the mirror. Only on the inside. She walked to him, fingers lifting to smooth his collar. "Then let me steady you." Their eyes met, heat and heartache flaring beneath the surface, and he leaned down to press a kiss against her forehead. "I don't know what's going to happen in there," he said. "But if anything goes wrong, I'll handle it," she interrupted softly. "You forget, I've lived in the fire before. I just didn't have a name on the building." Theo let out a shaky breath, and together they stepped into the private elevator that would take them to the boardroom. Ding. The chrome doors slid open to reveal a long glass corridor, flanked by 2 security guards. Slate stood waiting at the end, face grim. "They're all inside," he said. "Damien's been here for 20 minutes making noise. He brought half the press with him." Theo nodded once. "Let them watch." The boardroom itself was all sharp lines and colder eyes. 12 chairs. 12 men and women who once dismissed Theo as a ghost of legacy. Today they were watching something very different. Theo didn't hesitate. He walked to the head of the table and took the seat that had once belonged to his father. Callie stood behind him, her presence a quiet anchor. Damien, lounging to the side, clapped slowly. "Well, look who found his crown." "I'm not here to entertain you," Theo said, his voice razor smooth. "I'm here to correct the corruption you've let rot this company from the inside out." The room stilled. "I move for a vote of confidence," Slate said, sliding forward a thick dossier. "We have evidence that Damien leveraged board members with bribes, manipulated contracts, and falsified profit margins to edge out Theo's rightful inheritance." A murmur erupted around the table. Damien's face darkened. "That's a lie." Theo stood, calm, certain. "And I have a witness." The doors opened again. A woman stepped inside, older, poised. Everyone turned. "My name is Helena Voss," she said. "I was CFO of LexCorp for 30 years, until Damien forced me out when I wouldn't play dirty." Gasps. Damien shot to his feet. "This is a setup!" Helena handed a flash drive to Slate. "On here are signed deals, transfers, and wire receipts, proof that Damien used the company like his personal slush fund." The board members began whispering furiously. Theo glanced at Callie, her face still, unreadable. Then he said simply, "Let the vote begin." One by one, the hands rose. 10, 11, 12, unanimous. And as Damien stood, breathing like a cornered wolf, security stepped into the room. "You'll regret this," he hissed at Theo. "She'll regret it." Theo stepped forward, cold fury in his voice. "Threaten her again, and you'll wish I had stayed in the gutter." Chapter 12. The whole city, for her. The storm had passed. The boardroom sat empty now, echoes of tension fading into the polished silence. Damien was gone, dragged out in disgrace, his empire crumbling under the weight of his own greed. But Theo wasn't celebrating. He stood alone on the rooftop of the LexCorp building, collar turned up against the breeze. The city stretched endlessly below, glittering like 1,000 promises. But none of them meant anything without her. Callie hadn't spoken a word since they'd left the meeting. She'd followed him up here, eyes unreadable, steps careful, as if she were still trying to understand what had just happened. "I didn't do this for revenge," Theo said, without turning around. "Not really. I did it because I needed to become someone worthy of the second chance you gave me." She stepped closer, her voice quiet. "You already were." He turned slowly. Callie stood with the skyline behind her, wind playing at her hair. eyes shimmering with something between wonder and disbelief. "I don't want the company," he said. "Not the way my father did. I don't care about the buildings, or the power, or the name." "Then what do you want?" she asked, voice trembling. He closed the distance between them. "You," Theo breathed. "I want the girl who gave me soup on a rainy night. The woman who reminded me how it felt to be seen, to be human." Her throat bobbed, tears rising silently. "I bought back the company," he continued, pulling something small from his pocket, "so I could start fresh, with you." He opened his hand. A key. Not to the company, not to a mansion, to a modest brownstone, 3 blocks from where she first found him. "The whole city's mine now, Callie, but it means nothing unless you're in it." She stared at the key, then at him. "You're serious?" "I bought it yesterday," he said softly, "before the vote. Before I knew if I'd win or lose. Because even if I walked out of that boardroom with nothing, I needed a place we could begin again." The tears slipped free then, and before she could speak, he cupped her cheeks, kissed them away, and whispered, "Come home with me." She nodded. Choking on a laugh sob, she pulled him into a kiss so full of heat and hope, it felt like the sunrise breaking inside their chests. They kissed like the storm had been worth it. They kissed like the city belonged to them now. And in that moment, on a rooftop high above the world, Callie realized something she'd never dared to dream. The man who'd once slept on her couch had given her the whole damn city, just for loving him. The end.
Thank you for staying with us till then end. If you enjoy the story, please hit the like button and subscribe.